Biden's surprise trip to Ukraine today. We're joined in Washington, D.C. by two guests. Medea Benjamin is co-founder of Code Pink, co-author of the new book, War in Ukraine, Making Sense of a Senseless Conflict. Also with us, Matt Duss, visiting scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, former foreign policy advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders, and co-author of a piece in the New Republic headlined A Better Biden Doctrine. We welcome you both back to Democracy Now! Matt Duss, let's begin with you. Your response to this surprise visit before the announced visit to Poland that President Biden made today, meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv.
Now listen to this guy who was Bernie Sanders' foreign policy advisor. This is why I'm covering him way more, because I really wish I peeped this motherfucker before. So listen to this guy who's literally a Biden propagandist. I've seen quite a few of his media appearances now. Straight up State Department goon. So what was it, Bernie? Do you choose him because you liked his politics? Or was he forced on you? It's not good for Bernie either way. But man, this is damning when you see this guy. Listen to this.
Sure, and thanks for inviting me on. I think the visit by President Biden to Kyiv is, clearly intended just to show continuing support and solidarity with the people of Ukraine as we approach the one.
But not support and solidarity for people for East Palestine. So if the message is Biden showing up is a sign and show of support and solidarity, he does not show up for East Palestine. Doesn't show up for the millions of Americans that are homeless, that are struggling, that is demanding his attention. He shows up for Ukrainians, though. But the NATO left has no criticism of that.
1 year anniversary of the Russian invasion or the Russian further invasion on February 24th. And I think, for an American president to make a trip like this is enormously symbolic. If on all days on President's Day,
This guy Matt Duss is repeating everything we showed you for Morning Joe, every single fucking thing. What is the difference from the analysis that come from the NATO left and MSNBC? Zero, apparently.
To be make an appearance with Ukraine's president. So I think coming after days after we've seen a number of senior administration officials making speeches and holding consultations at the Munich Security Conference, working with allies and partners, to show continuing support. I think the president's visit really underlines that in an important way.
And the announcement of more, something like
in an important way. This in an important way. Might as well be a Biden state spokesperson. Is this Bernie Sanders' foreign policy advisor? Or is this Biden's PR agent? Which they all seem like they are now.
$500 million of weapons to Ukraine, mainly?
I think, the release of further funds that have been already allocated is important. I think sending the advanced form of long-range weapons that Ukrainians have continued to request. And I think it does show the way the president has approached this problem with a really important measure of restraint.
What?
The last point I would make is last week we saw.
I gotta make sure I heard that right. Play that.
It does show the way the president has approached this problem with a really important measure of restraint. The last point I would make is
Matt Duss is spreading the lie, and this is what Nina Turner did as well. That Joe Biden is doing a great job handling this crisis. That he's showing restraint. The guy who's blocked multiple peace deals. The EU and the Biden administration just blocked the peace deal that Beijing was offering. Every time they would draw a red line, and then they would cross their own red line a few months later. When Biden said, "Oh, we don't want to send tanks because that'd be too exploratory. We don't want to send longer range missiles because that'd be too exploratory." And then they did the thing that they criticized months before as being too exploratory. And then the media would be like, "Oh my God, Biden finally flipped the decision. He finally decided to send in the tanks." It's like, Where did he show restraint? The only people that have shown restraint has been Iran, China, and Russia. China has shown insane restraint, considering the United States has violated their sovereignty with Taiwan over and over again. Iran has shown incredible restraint despite the sanctions the United States put on them, despite the fact the United States pulled out of the Iran deal. And the fact they continue, like Joe Biden is doubling down on Trump's hardline Iran position. They still showing a lot of restraint as well. You got these red lines that are constantly crossed. But then Russia, China, and the United States allies are forced to show restraint. While the United States can engage in all-out, full-fledged geopolitical, economic, and hot war against countries, and that's considered their sovereign right. It's a very disgusting ideology.
Last week we saw a report in the Washington Post about various administration officials in conversations with their Ukrainian counterparts, making clear that there should be an opportunity sometime in the next few months, hopefully, for the possibility to find an opportunity to get to negotiations. They are very mindful that the United States and its partners cannot continue to supply Ukraine at the current rate. So I think that article we saw last week signaled an effort to start to prepare the environment for eventual negotiations.
This is President Biden speaking in Kyiv before he left.
Together, we've committed nearly 700 tanks and thousands of armored vehicles, 1,000 artillery systems, more than 2 million rounds of artillery ammunition, more than 50 advanced launch rocket systems, anti-ship and air defense systems, all defend Ukraine, and that doesn't count the other $500 million we're announcing with you today and tomorrow. That's going to be coming your way. And that's just the United States in this piece. And just today, that announcement includes artillery ammunition for HIMARS and howitzers, more javelins, anti-armor systems, air surveillance radars to help protect Ukrainian people from aerial bombardments. Later this week, we will announce additional sanctions against elites and companies that are trying to evade sanctions and backfill Russia's war machine.
That's President Biden speaking in a surprise trip to Kyiv this morning before heading on to Warsaw, Poland. We're also joined by Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink. Medea, your response to President Biden's trip and to this statement that he just made.
Well, I feel this is a propaganda move to shore up support for a senseless war that the American public are starting to realize has no end in sight except for more senseless waste of lives. We saw a new AP poll that showed that only 40% of the American people want to send more weapons to Ukraine. We see protests happening here in the United States, like the one that happened yesterday, bringing together a broad sector of people. And we see the protests happening all over Europe, a new coalition called Europe for Peace that is pushing their governments towards negotiations. And we see just from the United States,
So, by the way, what the NATO left will not tell you, here, I'm going to show you guys this. Regarding the massive protests in Europe, they're not showing you. This is Benjamin Norton here, translating this for me. 50,000 protesters came to the huge rally in Berlin, Germany. They are demanding an end to Europe's escalation of the NATO proxy war in Ukraine and immediate peace talks. So I bet if there's people from World Socialist website or anyone else writing a story, they will find one out of these 50,000 Germans who have far right views and be like, oh my God, you guys can't support this rally. You guys can't support this rally. Look at this guy over here. Look what he believes. That's what they will be doing. Meanwhile, in Germany, they organized and 50,000 people. So that is what Medea Benjamin was referring to. So let me go back to the video and we can continue. I'll go back just a little bit.
People want to send more weapons to Ukraine. We see protests happening here in the United States, like the one that happened yesterday, bringing together a broad sector of people. And we see the protests happening all over Europe, a new coalition called Europe for Peace that is pushing their governments towards negotiations. And we see just from the United States the opposite from Biden, saying we're sending more weapons. And of course, Zelensky, every time the U.S. agrees to send a new weapon like the tanks, then has another request like the fighter jets. And what is it going to be after that? Troops. The American public, the public in Europe, and the world community is saying we need to find an answer for this. That is why the top diplomat from China is on his way to Russia. They are about to announce a peace plan. The entire world is.
And Joe Biden in the EU just rejected that, showing that they don't care about peace. And this is a very critical fact that the NATO left, like Nina Turner, ignores. Which in her video where she's pretending, where she's calling out Joe Biden, she's pretending that Joe Biden is just standing in solidarity with the Ukrainian people instead of prolonging this war.
Calling for a peace plan. We saw this with President Lula from Brazil, who met with Biden. Biden was pushing Brazil to send weapons to Ukraine. He said, we don't want to join this war. We want to end this war.
Matt Duss, your response to Medea Benjamin's comment that this is a senseless war.
I agree it's a senseless war. It's a senseless war that was launched by Russian President Vladimir Putin.
This scumbag has said this line so many times. And this is the same line you hear on Morning Joe. The same line you hear on CNN. The same line you hear on TYT. It's almost like they're given a memo where they say erase the entire history of the conflict. We all know this is not true. Russia did not start this war. You had the NATO chief secretary admit this war started in 2014. Even the NATO chief secretary said, a lot of people don't know this, but this war didn't start when Russia invaded. It started in 2014. But this is the line they say because they are lying to people on purpose. So I'm asking you guys this question. Why does the NATO left have to lie to you guys about this conflict? Does someone who think they are in the right have to come on this show very low energy like Matt Duss is and lie? Like, look at the body language of this guy. Look at how the way he presents his information. You guys see the passion that comes from my voice. You guys see the passion of Medea Benjamin. Meanwhile, this guy sounds like he's reading a script every time I listen to the guy. No enthusiasm at all. This guy is clocking in. This guy is clocking in and doing a job every day. Not giving a fuck. But he's embraced and loved by the Bernie wing. He is embraced and loved by Annika Sperin and TYT. Meanwhile, they blocked us. What does that say? I am begging you guys to ask, what does that say? Now, let's continue to the video.
We don't want to join this war. We want to end this war.
Matt Duss, your response to Medea Benjamin's comment that this is a senseless war.
I agree it's a senseless war. It's a senseless war that was launched by Russian President Vladimir Putin. I would agree that we all want to end this war. I think the people who want to end this war most of all are the Ukrainians. I think the question is under what conditions can we end this war in a way that's durable and that provides for continuing security and not is simply a pause before we get to another round of even worse fighting. I think this has been the approach of the Biden administration thus far. This
guy is nothing but a PR agent for Joe Biden. That is not true. That is not true. So Biden in the U.S. in the Zelensky position is whenever there's a Ukrainian offensive, whenever they gain momentum, they say, oh, we can't negotiate now. We got Russia on the back foot. Why would we negotiate when we're winning? When Russia is winning, when they're taking land, they say, oh, we can't negotiate now because that would be a sign of weakness and we get Putin everything he wants. Now he's taking the land. They have it both ways. There is no situation, there is no position the United States and Ukraine would accept for peace talks. And they have made that 100% clear.
to get to a point where you have real negotiations that can produce a ceasefire, if not a peace agreement, an actual ceasefire that is enforceable and durable. And I certainly grant that there are very legitimate concerns and questions on the part of lots of people, including within the administration, about how long this can go on, and continuing to seek opportunities for precisely the negotiations that I previously mentioned.
Matt, Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has said he's ruling out trading territory for peace as part of any negotiated settlement with Putin. He made the comments in an interview with the BBC. Your response?
I think from Zelensky's perspective, it makes sense for him to say that. And I will also recognize that as a matter of international law. All of Ukraine, including Crimea, this is part of Ukraine. Now, if we get to a point where there's a ceasefire that is possible and durable in the absence of those kind of maximalist goals, I think that is something that we should look at seriously. I'm not proposing to negotiate on the behalf of the Ukrainians. No one should do that.
Oh, yes, we should.
But I do think.
See, this is the line that comes from the NATO left all the time. They would say in one sentence that we have to provide Ukraine weapons, arms, munitions, and pretty much social welfare, because if we don't, they will immediately crumble to Russia and they will lose. And then they will also take that statement and turn around and say, we have no right to tell the Ukrainians how they should negotiate. They are only in this fight because of us. We are the one who helped provoke this war in 2014. We are the only reason they are in this fight, and they should be thanking us every goddamn day. So if anyone should have a say on how you guys should negotiate, it should be us who's funding the war. How is this not an obvious point for the NATO left? Apparently it's not. Clowns.
We do have an interest in seeking an end to this war, and I think the administration is clear about that, even if they very carefully do not want to get ahead, at least publicly, of declarations from the Ukrainian president.
Medea Benjamin, if you could respond to what Matt says, and you talked about the anti-war protest yesterday in Washington, D.C. You were initially on the scheduled to speak, but then you didn't speak. I was looking at a series of tweets between you and Ralph Nader, and he said, why didn't you speak? Can you explain what's happening within the anti-war movement? But first, respond to Matt.
I think the U.S. has a history of trying to stop negotiations, especially the ones that were taking place in March, a month after the war began, and the West decided that they didn't want Zelensky to make an agreement with Russia. I think that the constant sending of weapons is saying to Zelensky, you don't have to negotiate. We are behind you 100%. The U.S., what it should be doing is talking to the Russians. Biden, instead of making a symbolic appearance in Kyiv, should make a meeting with Putin, and they should talk about how to end this war. The issue of yesterday's march, rally, and then a march to the White House. It was fascinating, Amy. I've never been at an anti-war rally like that. My organization, Code Pink, didn't want me to speak there because they didn't like a number of the speakers and their positions
unserious
on other issues. But when have we ever had an anti-war march that brought together Ron Paul, Tulsi Gabbard, Jill Stein, Dennis Kucinich, people from very different...
I told you guys before, the speakers is 100% irrelevant. The only thing that matters is spreading the issue of U.S. forever war, advocating for peace in Ukraine. The speakers are there just to attract attention so that attention can be on the message. There is no rally. There is none of these events that happen that immediately ends in a solution. Like this rally doesn't happen and the war doesn't end. There's not a America for all rally and then America for all happens. The whole goal of a rally is to spread awareness. Okay? If you understand that point, when you understand that, you realize nothing else fucking matters. As long as everyone's on point on that message, right? Does not matter if Tosi's there, does not matter if Jackson Hinkle's there, doesn't matter if anyone's there. In fact, more people being there is better because it shows that people that have different views and different beliefs are pushing this idea. Then you get people engaged on the issue. Get people engaged on the issue, and then you continue actions. You move on to the next step. You start continuing to put force and pressure on the government by hitting the streets, engaging in general strikes, make contact so we can continue the anti-war movement. All the stuff that these overly online leftists, the professional managerial class people talk about is irrelevant and it is meant to distract. Oh my God, there's a YouTuber there. There's a libertarian there giving a speech. Who gives a shit? I am in my neighborhood. I am talking to my friends, my family, my sister, my brothers, my neighbors, my friends. Don't give a shit about Jackson Hinkle. Don't give a shit about him. Surprise! I went to the store today, got some food. You know what's going on? No one's talking about Jackson Hinkle in a goddamn grocery store. Everyone's talking about how they're gonna pay their bills. The whole point of the rally is to get people to focus on the issue. No one who is not online like you guys are, no one who is deeply unserious like you guys are focusing on, oh my God, who are the speakers of this event? They just hear anti-war rally. Oh my God, what's going on here? Then they may listen to a speaker speak and they may hear him talk about why they support ending the war. That's a good thing. And no one can convince me otherwise. It doesn't matter who's at the event. As long as it's a good issue, something that you're bringing people together to advance on. It's deeply unserious. It's only people on Twitter, only people who are obsessed with podcasters who made this a thing. The people who tweet about Jimmy Dore every goddamn day. People who tweet about Jackson Hinkle. Jackson Hinkle is a 23-year-old kid. He's a 23-year-old kid, and grown-ass men, grown-ass women lose their goddamn mind over a young-ass kid. It is unbelievable to me. People who are actually in the struggle, it's unbelievable to us. Struggling to pay our bills. We had to take people in our house because they would be homeless. We just had a conversation. We trying to figure out who's going to take in a family friend because a family friend lost their house. And I told them, like, we can't really do it because we got one person home. So we got our cousin that took her in, right? Like, these are things that are going on in our life. But you motherfuckers are talking about podcasters. It's a joke to me. It's a joke to literally anyone who's serious about anything other than these overly online leftists who I'm done with. I have cut these motherfuckers off. The old relics from the Bernie campaign and these people who spend all the time tweeting about Jimmy Dore, tweeting about Jackson Hinkle. I don't have time for your stupid shit. I'm going to Seattle next week. I'm going to Seattle next Saturday to help workers strike back. I want to help Casey tenants in my city. I want to continue to advocate for socialism and ending the war machine in the prison industrial complex. You motherfuckers want to end Jackson Hinkle. I don't give a fuck about Jackson Hinkle. And the fact that you guys do is embarrassing. He's a 23-year-old kid, and you guys are melting down about him. You guys are preventing a legendary anti-war speaker from attending a rally because you guys are afraid of a 23-year-old kid. It's a joke what the professional managerial class is in this country. Meanwhile, we're fucking struggling to live. We're struggling to live here, but these motherfuckers are stressed over Jimmy Dore.
Political perspectives. And there is another march coming up on March 18th, which a different set of groups is putting together. I think we have to be at every anti-war march. And I'm also excited that on Tuesday, we're having a lobby day in Congress, inviting people of all political persuasions to come meet us in the Rayburn building and go to the offices of every member of the Armed Services Committee in Congress to say enough weapons, stop sending weapons, start negotiating, stop escalating, start negotiating. This is the message I think now that more and more American people want us to take to Congress, which has done nothing but supply billions and billions of weapons to keep this war going when there is no winning on the battlefield. And I think that's an important thing to say to you, Matt Duss, because there is no winning on the battlefield. If you agree to that, then why do we keep fueling this war?
Matt, your response.
Sure. I mean, first, I would just quickly, reference something Medea just said about the United States stopping negotiations. She referenced talks that were happening in March and in April, and I think I would encourage viewers to look closely into that, because I think that's a very, very incomplete and frankly inaccurate rendition of what actually happened in that situation in those negotiations between the Ukrainians and the Russians. With regard to ending the war, as I said,
you notice how he doesn't clarify. I was like, are you going to clarify what she said? She just said Medea lied. That's what he just said. Medea just lied to you guys. But I'm going to move on. I'm not going to clarify that lie that she just told. What a sneaky weasel this guy is, considering we expose him all the time, the fact that he lies on this conflict. This guy said that Ukraine and Russia has no cultural connection before. They're just a random country. Zoya, friend of the show, honorary RBN member, she's from Odessa, Ukraine, formerly USSR. There is common travel between Eastern Ukraine and Russia. Families literally live cross-border from each other. She talks about this all the time. You have BBC that did documentaries about this, but Matt Duss went on TYT and said, oh, there's no historical and cultural connection between Russia and Ukraine. So he says that people like Medea Benjamin lies about this, but that is what he does. It is straight up projection.
Certainly want this war to end. I think acknowledging that there can be no victory on the battlefield, even if one does acknowledge that, there is still an argument for continuing to support the Ukrainians for creating the best possible situation on the battlefield that they can to come into negotiations from the strongest possible position. That has been, I think, the Biden administration's approach. That has been the approach of our European allies. That does not preclude eventual negotiations when those negotiations become possible. I would note also that the Biden administration has been talking to the Russians at various levels, even if we're not seeing phone calls between President Biden.
Bro, our next story to show how he is full of shit is how Joe Biden and the EU shut down another peace deal, the one that Beijing was offering. They're shutting down Israel. Literally, Naftali Bennett, that raging fascist, even he was like, you guys are out of your goddamn minds. He wanted to hold a peace summit, shut down by the United States and the UK. So Matt Duss, who pretty much called Medea Benjamin a liar, here lying himself once again. Man, this man cannot help but lie. The NATO left is filled with a bunch of people who can't do anything but lie about this conflict.
And President Putin, there's been numerous reports of contacts at various levels between United States officials and their counterparts to identify when negotiations are appropriate and can achieve something. But as yet, Vladimir Putin is the one who has given no indication that he is ready for that. And I think that's very important to recognize.
That's just not true, Matt. And going back to the negotiations that were happening in March, it was not only confirmed by Turkish officials involved in the negotiations and Ukrainians themselves, but now we have former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett from Israel saying that the West blocked these negotiations.
In
terms of the negotiations, I think it's very exciting that now we have the Chinese who are on their way to talk to Putin in Russia and will be announcing a peace plan. And I think the Chinese are representing what the entire world wants to see. Stop the fighting now. You say, when will it be time for... This is one thing I give
Democracy Now! Props for, because thank God they have a debate. They bring Matt Duss on and they bring a counter narrative. Anna Kasparian in the Clowns at TYT brought Matt Duss on as the foreign policy expert and allowed him to lie to thousands of their subscribers. So if you're going to bring on a lying government bootlicker like Matt Duss on, you need to bring on a counter narrative, or you need to put back yourself. Do not bring this guy on to present information as a neutral arbiter. He is going to lie, and if Medea Benjamin was not here, Democracy Now! Would let him get away with it the same way that Anna Kasparian, one of the many access journalists on the left now, let Matt does get away with very similar lies. We did a video on that a few months ago. So let Medea, I'll go back just a little bit, and I'll let Medea Benjamin continue her point, knocking down Matt Duss's horrific lies.
Who are on their way to talk to Putin in Russia and will be announcing a peace plan. And I think the Chinese are representing what the entire world wants to see. Stop the fighting now. You say, when will it be time for negotiations? Well, the time for negotiations is way past due. And I think the pressure to send fighter jets, I mean, we're just getting deeper and deeper into a third world war, into a nuclear war.
NATO left
and
don't care.
I think it's the American people should be horrified that this is the direction that our government is taking us. And it's the Ukrainian lives that are being lost and sacrificed every day while the U.S. is trying to weaken Russia. Enough is enough. Negotiations now.
I wanted to get Matt's response to China. Both Vice President Harris and Secretary of State.
What she should have did, and this is not really necessarily criticism of her here. What Amy Goodman should have did, like, hey yo, what Medea Benjamin said, she said you said something that was inaccurate. You said the United States was promoting peace, and then she just gave examples of the United States not promoting peace. Do you have a response to that? Amy Goodman literally bails Matt Duss out here. That's why I don't like these like overly like moderated debates. I like free flow conversation debates. Like, she bails him out here. Like, he should answer for that lie that Medea Benjamin just destroyed him on. But sure, oh no, never mind. Just move on. No, Tippy, you do that. No, I'm not interested in that. Look at this.
Trying to weaken Russia. Enough is enough. Negotiations now.
I wanted to get Matt's response to China. Both Vice President Harris and Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned China at the Munich Security Conference this weekend against providing support to Moscow. As reports emerge, Beijing supplying Russian forces with non-lethal military assistance. Beijing responded to the U.S. threats earlier today.
It is the U.S., not China, that is providing a steady stream of weapons on the battlefield. The United States is in no position to make demands of China. We will never accept the U.S. pointing fingers at Sino-Russian relations or even coercing us.
That's Wang Wenbin, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson. Matt Duss.
I mean, well, you can't dismiss what he just said. I mean, certainly the United States has been supplying weapons. And more broadly, I think there are, part of what China is able to exploit in its own rhetoric is the fact that the United States has a very bad record on these issues going back many decades. It employs a whole series of double standards on issues of international law when it comes to dealing with friends versus dealing with adversaries. And I do think these are arguments that have, have an audience in the world, particularly in the global South. Now, certainly, I think China has its own problems, both with its foreign policy and certainly with its domestic affairs, its repression of the Uyghurs, just to name one of the various abuses.
This motherfucker repeat every single CIA operation talking point. The genocide of the Uyghur Muslims have been debunked multiple times to the point where the Associated Press says there's no evidence of it. There is more evidence of a genocide of Black Americans than there is of the Uyghur genocide in China, where their population is thriving, where their literacy rate has gone up, their life expectancy has gone up. In America, Black literacy rate has gone down. Black life expectancy has gone down. Like, my point I'm making is, if you say there's a genocide of Uyghur Muslims because they have a few criticisms of the Chinese system, there is more evidence to say there's a Black genocide in the United States. But if you was to say that, they'd be like, oh no, that's not true. It's bullshit, and it is CIA op. And then there are many journalists that went there and said we don't see anything that constitutes a genocide. Where's the bodies? How is there a genocide with no bodies? Have you guys seen the pictures? You guys see Yemeni children all the time. All the time. You see starving Yemeni children because the United States is funding a genocide in Yemen. All the time you see Israelis killing Palestinians. You see dead Palestinian kids. There's no There's no journalistic video or pictures of these quote-unquote Uyghur genocides that many people in the world has been asking. No evidence are being produced. And then whenever people they're asked of this, they say, oh, well, this is just Chinese suppressing evidence. White people will believe anything about China. So there's a secret genocide going on in China. They're just suppressing all the evidence. And we got satellites everywhere. We got Western spies in your countries. We got journalists going to your area. But China is super good at suppressing dead bodies, apparently. That is what the West wants you to believe. But you see how Matt Duss says whatever the CIA wants him to do. The same with Vosh, who debated many people on this and lost every single debate when he's trying to push the Uyghur genocide nonsense. The entirety of the NATO left pushed this nonsense with no evidence because, as I said before, white people believe anything said about Asian countries. Oh my God, you know, in DPRK, the citizens believe that he don't take a shit. Yeah, man, them dumb Asians. Them dumb Asians, man. Do you know that China doing a genocide against the people? Man, that's crazy. Them ruthless, violent Asian people. There's no question. There's no questioning of this rhetoric because of inherent white supremacy. I'll go back to that part where he says that again, and we only 3 minutes. I'll let it play a bit.
That have have an audience in the world, particularly in the global South. Now, certainly, I think China, has its own problems, both with its foreign policy and certainly with its domestic affairs, its repression of the Uyghurs, just to name one of the various abuses it's been carrying out. But I think we should not dismiss these arguments. Now, as for China's role in brokering peace, personally, I'm very skeptical that the Chinese government will be willing to play an actually productive role here. They do have influence with Vladimir Putin, certainly. He's become much more reliant on support from the Chinese government over the course of this war. But going back to what Medea mentioned, Brazilian President Lula, I certainly don't dismiss the possibility that Lula could play a productive role in this as well. This is something I think the United States, frankly, should be willing to work with. If the president and his administration have, at least rhetorically, said that we need to make space for others to play a role, particularly leaders from the global South in global affairs. So I think we should be willing to see if Lula can produce something here and not dismiss that out of hand.
Well, we gave you the first word, Matt. So Medea Benjamin, the last word.
I think it's very exciting that the Chinese are coming up with a peace.
And this is not really a criticism, but take it as it is. This is why you can't host debates for 20 minutes. Like, what exactly is the point for hosting a 20-minute debate like this, where Matt does get to lie, weasel, squirm, Amy Goodman bails him out and changes the subject when Medea Benjamin pins him against the wall. Medea Benjamin pinned this boy against the wall. Could have took his lunch money. But then Amy Goodman changes the subject immediately. And now we're on last words, man. This is why this old media style is not appealing to me, at least, I should say. Like, you need to have, I want to see Medea Benjamin and Matt Duss. These motherfuckers need to have a 1-hour sit-down conversation where they go through all Matt Duss's lies. And if Matt Duss thinks that Medea Benjamin is lying over anything, they can go through that. You notice how he quickly when he accused her of lying, he gave no evidence. Medea Benjamin called him out and then provided evidence. That's why people like Matt Duss benefit from this format where you can say your talking points, get the fuck out real quickly.
Plan, because we know that Putin would be on board for that, and then we have to get the U.S. and Zelensky on board for that as well. I think there is this a very loud groundswell coming up from below and from the global South to say enough. We have to find a way to end this. It's causing greater hunger around the entire world. It's causing greater increase in prices of energy. It's causing more dirty energy to be used. It's time to find a solution. And I think now it's the West against the rest of the world saying, end this war now.
Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink, her book War in Ukraine, Making Sense of a Senseless
So I
Conflict.
think we saw everything that we need to see here. So that's the debate between Medea Benjamin and Matt Duss. And you guys see Matt Duss' position there, which is the position that the NATO left is not shy to admit, that they support Biden and his agenda. They think Biden did a good job of putting bringing our allies together. Nina Turner and her black female co-host, they was praising Joe Biden for standing in solidarity with Ukraine. And this is why they have to oppose these rallies. That's why they got to smear the rally and prevent people like Medea Benjamin, who knows the truth. Medea Benjamin knows the truth on this issue, so she's willing to attend a rally with anyone. And then the little liberals in Code Pink who felt uncomfortable, in this quarantine, Max Blumenthal was reporting, who felt uncomfortable at the event, prevented her from speaking. And you had a lot of the Matt Duss leftists, the TYT leftists, like Anna Kasparian, they love Matt Duss, right? So they smeared the rally because they agree with Matt Duss, because they support the NATO proxy war, right? And they in Code Pink being useful idiots, a lot of boutique left, they was using them as a reason why they smeared the rally. They said even Code Pink pulled out a rally. They gave them the exact soundbite they wanted. So much props to Medea Benjamin for not falling for the bullshit and leading by example. And the people, the young millennials who believe they know more than Medea Benjamin on this, shame on them.